I'm One Man Stands Audio. I've been doing a recording for a cover of Meshuggah's Demiurge. I was waiting on someone doing vocals, but they couldn't give me a time frame. Mike Shreds. Go and follow him on Twitch. Couldn't give me a time frame for when he was going to be available to do the vocals, so I just went ahead and done my own, had a stab at it, and I'm alright with it. It's not as I would hope it would have been. Started doing the vocals and the first take was kind of awful. I will say that, it's kind of awful. My voice was really straining because to do the harsh vocals for this one and for any kind of metal harsh vocals, you need to let your voice come all out in one go. You can't kind of hold back because you restrict the movement of the vocal cords then, and you end up kind of doing damage. But because I'm in an untreated house, very conscious of neighbours, so can't do my usual voice, which I've got quite a loud voice, singing voice that is. If I was in the studio, I would just let rip and I'd be able to do this one no problem. Here, it's tough doing it at like 50%, 75% level of what I would like to have done. Puts a lot of strain on your voice. You would think it would be the opposite for harsh metal vocals. You would think it would be like the louder you go, the harder it gets, but it's actually the opposite. The louder you get, so long as you're doing it correctly, which is, this is another reason why you should go and follow Mike Shreds on Twitch. If you watch him, he'll tell you as well, he does vocal tuition as well and vocal coaching. If you do like a whisper and you get a kind of raspy whisper, you're using the false vocal cords which are actually above your actual voice box. If you were to go that sound at the end of the sigh, that's what you want for doing harsh vocals. So to do that, you would think that the louder you go, so long as you're doing that technique, that you're actually doing more damage, but it's the opposite way around. The lower in volume you're doing it, you're actually putting more strain on because you're trying to restrict the amount of air coming out, and it's the amount of air you let out and how you direct the air, how you control how much gets out, that'll make those false vocal cords vibrate and get that growl sound. But anyway, the mix, go over here to the right screen. I use Ableton, deal with it, it's my favourite of the DAWs. It's simple, it's not as complicated as like Reaper or Pro Tools, you know, where you need to either open a mono channel or a stereo channel, then you need to arm it to write or arm it to record. It's just too convoluted. With this, you just say add track and it'll add a stereo track. If you want it in mono, then what you would do is say for talking sakes, this channel here, right? If I wanted this in mono, at the moment it is a stereo track because this is MIDI drums. If I wanted this in mono, I would have to change this to 0, so it brings it from the immediate left back into the center, and do the same for this one here, which is at the far right, and it'll bring that right into the middle. So you're only getting the signal from here as opposed to what it's set at the moment, which is that. So there's your mono channel, there's what it's set to just now. A lot of the other DAWs, this will be set to like 100 for hard left and 100 for hard right. Ableton just goes to as high as 50. It's what I'm used to now anyway. So there we go. So the way I do it is I usually start off with one track in MIDI. So what you would normally get is, here's the channel here, and it would have, I think I've got one here that's actually got the drum software in. There we go. So I use Contact 8 Player, which I then use. So, there we go. Yes, you can see it. It's Spectre Digital's Extinction Level event. And I mean, look at the amount of different drum presets you're getting here. This is just straight out the box. You're getting all of these. The first 12 are already like EQ'd and has like compression and all the rest of it already on. The last 2 are completely unprocessed. What I would do normally is I would just do a kick and a snare to start off with, just to get a rough drum pattern So this is all snare hits. If this was only the one track that I start out with to record my drums before splitting it into different channels, I would record kick and a snare. You get a rough pattern. I would play it live on my MIDI keyboard, and then what I would do is I would go in. I haven't really done it much in this. I've done it for, I think, the snare hits and some of the toms hits, but you'll see here, like most people will just, that first hit has to hit on right on the line of the first beat. But you can see here after that first beat, it's slightly off from the third beat. And the reason I do that is it makes it sound less robotic. If I was to have that right on the line, you're going to have it playing at the exact same time as the kick, as well as maybe toms, hi-hats. So if you just put maybe your snare, sometimes the kick and the toms, you just put them ever so slightly off to the right or off to the left of that line where your instinct tells you that it should be, it starts sounding more human. And then down here, so down here, this, all these dots, that's the strength of the hits. This is one of the advantages of using a MIDI keyboard, because you can actually, if you've got a touch sensitive MIDI keyboard, then it'll detect the amount of strength that you're putting into that hit. So I just out of instinct go, da, 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 you know, so every like 4, if I'm doing a 4 on the floor beat, every first hit of the 4 is going to be the strongest, and then it's going to sort of trail off. And if you do that as well, if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you can go in here after you've recorded the performance of the snare, kick, whatever, and you can just manually adjust these, the velocities it's called. This is the velocity, which basically means the strength of the hit. So you can go in here and you can manually do this yourself. If you don't do it, depends what genre you're playing. Sometimes some genres of metal you will have to play directly on that line. Like if you're playing stuff like industrial or stuff like Electric Callboy, where they use a lot of hard step techno sort of beats, that has to be directly on the line every hit. But if you're doing it for something like anything from thrash up to extreme death metal, black metal, you're better off making it sound ever so slightly sloppy. Not too sloppy though, but it just makes it sound human, because what drummer do you know that plays exactly where he should hit that snare or kick or whatever? None. It's impossible. You would need to be an android. So yeah, I'll let you hear a little bit of the intro, and I'll explain how I've done this. So let me go down to the intro here. So this is the intro here. That's the chain that I used for it, but before I go into that, I'll explain what I'm using instruments wise. I can't actually open this because I know for a fact if I try and open this while I stream, it's going to crash. It's just reason for some reason. It's very buggy. It's a great bit of software to use for like any synth sound or any. It's got a couple of good drum machines on it. It's got a brilliant sampler in it, which I use a lot, and this is what I've done for this. It's either this track or this one here. One of them is a sample of me singing a C3 note. The reason I've done a C3 note is because that's the default key. That's where the sampler will center in on for your sample. So if I had sung, for talking sakes, a B or a B flat, that note's going to be still on the C key, the C3 key on the MIDI keyboard, which is a bit of a pain in the ass to try and transpose. So you're better off, if you're doing a sample of a voice recording in the C3 and then just playing what you should do from there. And it just means that every note that you're playing, you will get that voice sample playing directly in that key, which is what I've done here. I don't know how the guys actually done the original intro sequence. I think it was a vocal sample of someone just singing one note, and then it was reversed and then had a load of effects put on it. That's what I done. I sang the C3 note, flipped it, in the sampler so that instead of going ah, it was ah, so you get that sort of fade in, and then played the notes of the actual sequence on the MIDI keyboard. This other one is one of the actual choirs in Reason, so it's a synth choir, just to sort of makes it sound a bit thicker than just my voice sample. And then once I've done that and played all the notes, and these are exactly the same, these two, bring this velocity thing back down the velocity map so you can see here, stretch that out a bit. You can see here, like, every note on this is not exactly on the line either. The reason being, with some voices, especially if it's kind of fading in, by the time the strongest part of that note comes in, it's already like so far into that beat. So it starts sounding off beat. So if you bring everything slightly offline, it'll just line up better. And then once I'd recorded this, it was actually only this bit that I'd recorded, and then I just duplicated it over here, merged these two into one sequence, and then copied that, dropped it into this other track to be played by the MIDI choir, the synth choir, and applied, effects-wise, started off with a classic chorus, you know, like just typical chorus pedal sound. Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses uses chorus pedals extensively. Anytime you hear a fretless bass, chances are it's going to have a fretless on it, because fretless bass with a chorus just sounds gorgeous. And I know, because I play fretless. The rate is very, very slow. And the reason I've got it slow is because I don't want it wobbling too much. I just want it to kind of open up, start phasing back, you know, so it's quite a slow transition for that sort of wobbly warble. Then I've got a slow flanger, again, same reasoning as this. Wanted it to be a slow movement so that it gets that really spooky warble instead of just going, you know, it just sounds awful. This thing, I can't remember exactly what it does. I think it actually does some sort of a warble kind of, it's probably doing exactly what these two are doing together, but just in one plugin. But I added it afterwards, and just, you can see I've dropped the rate again, but I didn't put as much of the actual effect into the signal. So that's how much of this sound is going into the actual signal. So it's only like 36%, whereas these two, it's just all on. Then it's a phaser. You get phaser pedals. You know what they do. It's like it's very similar to a flanger pedal, you know, so it's kind of doing that, you know, like kind of jet sound. You know, when a jet whooshes by, it does that. It's kind of what a flanger does. It just, the phaser's just a different timing of it. It'll start off slightly slow, and then towards the end of the note, that transition from the frequency will get faster towards the end of it, and then it'll slow back down again. Towards the end of the note, it'll speed back up. So it's, whereas the flanger, it's an even transition. It's just up, down, you know. So then after that, I put on a ring modulation. A lot of synth players, you know, like analog synths, will have a ring modulation on it. If you've ever heard the Doctor Who theme tune, the classic one, that first note that you hear, that's a ring modulator. It's just, it was heavily applied to the synth. And then Archetype by Neural DSP, which, yes, it's a guitar pedal, but I didn't need the amps, didn't need the pitch shifter, didn't need the overdrive or anything like that. Don't need the amps, don't need the cabinets, don't need the EQ. This is the only thing that I needed, which was the delay and the reverb. Delay is kind of a bit off time. It's not a straight 1/8. It's slightly delayed 1/8, and there's not a lot of it going in, if I remember right. Yeah, that's about probably 40% being applied, because if I didn't want to have too much of it, or otherwise it would ring out forever. And then this reverb, if it's off, it's just a normal reverb. if it goes on, it puts on that shimmer effect, and you've heard the shimmer effect on almost all of Gojira's guitar tracks. Hence why it's here in the Gojira X. You'll hear it sometimes on Sleep Token, if that's your cup of tea. I do like some of Sleep Token stuff, I'll have to admit. But you'll hear it anyway, and then it's basically just an EQ, because once all of these effects have been put on, the effect on the EQ, it made everything sound really harsh on the ears. There was a lot of high-end sort of hissiness. There was a lot of that because of the amount of effects going on to it, especially that ring modulator. So I was just cutting out. You can see here, is that going up actually? Oh, I didn't actually apply on. I thought I'd cut out some of the high frequencies, but it was boomy as well. And the boominess is down at the lower end of the frequency spectrum. So it starts cutting from maybe about 400 and then starts slowly dropping off the low frequencies to about 125 hertz. And that just takes out a lot of the bassy low end, so that you're hearing only the bit that you need, which is this sort of lower mid region. That's the most important part. That's the meat and potatoes of this whole sequence. You can't actually see that, so I don't know why I was... Anyway, it sounds like this. Not hearing the guitars yet. We'll get there. We'll get there. You heard the guitar fading in there. That's this bit here. In the original, it is really subtle, but there is a guitar. There is two guitars playing the last note of the main riff that comes in here. It slowly fades in, so you almost hear it, and you're like, oh, that sounds like the guitar's coming in there. So I recorded just that part there. This is another two guitars here that's playing the exact same as this. Well, almost the exact same, but it's very, very low in the mix, because for that intro sequence, it's mostly this synth part that you're introduced to at first. Then you've got the little bit of the guitar playing, that's that chorus part that comes in later on. Slightly... Well, it's not slightly, it's quite a bit lower than this part here. So it kind of hints at what you're going to hear later on. I'll play it with those bits in here. It sounds like that. It's really spooky. It's this really spooky effect. But I'm glad Manuel said that about how the original was done, because this actually does sound a lot closer to what I had originally. And that part here, these guitars here, that's what I had originally. I didn't even have this part in anywhere. It was just these two guitars playing that bit, that riff that the synth's now playing. And it sounded good. It's got almost the exact same effects here. You can see here. Chorus. Don't know if I put flanger on it though. No, it's literally just chorus. But I did have, that's why I did have the same effects as this. But once I had this synth sequence, I didn't need it on these two guitars. So I only had the chorus going on it and a little bit of the shimmer reverb. But originally it was the guitar doing all of this. But it sounds a lot better now after Manuel telling me how the guys in Meshuggah originally done it. And it sounds a lot closer now. So let me see. Let you hear the guitars, the main guitars here. Just guard thine ears. I don't think it's way loud. I mean, it shouldn't be any louder than my voice. If it is, let me know, because otherwise I'm going to be talking and you're not going to hear it. So again, I'm using the Neural DSP Gojira X, and I'm just using Joe Duplantier's Rhythm 1 preset, but I've changed it. I've tweaked it a little bit because this is a heavily drop tuning. It's a drop F tuning. So you're almost a full octave down from traditional 6-string standard tuning. Almost. You're one step up from being a full octave, and then you're into bass guitar territory. And when you start getting into bass guitar territory, you need to you can't have too much of the bassy notes in there. Like most metal guitars will drop these mids down a little bit. Most gent guitarists will have it down about here. But for a heavily drop tuning, you want a bit more of the mids, so that you can actually hear the notes a bit clearer. They'll have a bit more attack, and it won't sound as muddy. Treble again, you would maybe have it a slightly bit higher on a normal, like even down as far as drop C. You would maybe see this up about here. I didn't want a lot of treble on it because it's too harsh in the ears when it's in a really low drop tuning. Gain is actually really low. If you're in anything down to about drop C, that gain's probably going to be about here, and then you're going to have an overdrive pedal on top of that. And again, because it's almost a full octave down, you don't want a lot of distortion. Otherwise, you just lose all of the definition of that note that you're trying to play. You just can't hear it. It just sounds like a distorted mess. And I don't even think I have an overdrive pedal on. Oh, I have. It's on, but you can see here again, distortion is off. There's no extra distortion going in here. I'm just slightly boosting the level and adjusting the tone. So all that's doing is it's basically smoothing out the distortion and giving it a slight, almost a volume boost. So it's kind of imperceptible. But yeah, so that's and then the presence, normal tunings down to drop C, that would probably be quite a bit higher as well. Depth, I wanted just a little bit of the rumble, because it's easier to have it here before you start doing EQ, and then take it out with a high pass filter or a low cut. It's easier to take it out than you can't put it back in once. If you don't have any of the bass going in here, you're never going to be able to put it back in just with EQ. It has to be there in the first place. And again, and because I've got the gain down so low, and the bass is basically at default, so I don't think there's any bass being applied. It's coming from this resonance, the depth. And then all I'm doing is I'm adjusting the output so that I've got quite low output pickup. So you can see here the input I had to boost up quite a bit, and I had to do the same with the output so that it hits that distortion threshold. And then it was still quite low because I've got low output pickups, and I don't like adjusting my input level on my audio interface. I'll just keep it set so that it's set for the highest output, which is my, see over here, my 5-string multi-scale. That's the highest output. It's got 18 volt active pickup, so it's a beast. So I've got my audio interface set for the high output of that, and then it's easy enough to boost the volume for the guitar. So just boosting the output here so that it actually hits that distortion threshold. And effects wise, it's just basic EQ, and you'll see here I'm not using a lot of, as far as EQ goes, all I'm using is a stock EQ which is built into Ableton. I've got Takelnikov Nova, which is I could do this with a stock dynamic EQ, but this one's handier because you can see it, and you can see the waveform, and all that's doing is every time that chugs, it does that. That's going to be the volume kind of goes, shoots up for every one of those chugs. So all that does is for you hit it, you set it so that you just look at the signal, and every time that you see that jumping up there, you adjust that threshold so that it starts cutting it down here by 1 decibel to 2 decibels. I usually have it to 1 or 1.5 decibels, which is 1.5 decibels here. And if I play it again, you can see here, the top of that spike there, that on the bassier frequencies, that's at about 125 to 130 hertz. So all I'm doing there is I'm basically telling this EQ, this dynamic EQ, every time that it goes too loud, drop it down by 1.5 decibels, and it just smooths out the overall volume of that riff, and you're not going to get that dun 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 dun, which is what it would do if I had this switched off. And then this is after that I have UAD, Universal Audio, Pultec EQ. This is based off a real Pultec analog EQ, and it's a trick that I picked up from watching Glenn Fricker, who funnily enough owns the company that does the drum software that I'm using. But he's a producer and engineer, produced signed bands, still is mixing away, but he does like tutorials, and I've learned most of the stuff that I do now but from him and Scott Elliott at Chernobyl Audio, Bobby Torres at Frightbox Recording. It's basically those three guys that I learned from. Glenn learned this trick from the Andy Sneap forums, which was for like bedroom producers, even professional producers, and they would all trade, you know, like their little tips and tricks. And Andy Sneap had this one in his forum, and what it's doing is here. It's got a low frequency here. This is what I'm adjusting the EQ of. It's this 30 hertz, and I'm boosting it, and that's kind of attenuating for that boost. So it's boosting and cutting at the same time, which sounds counterproductive, I know, on paper and in your head. Why would you cut it and then why would you boost it and then cut it? What's the point? Why not just leave it? The reason Andy Sneap done this, it's an audio hallucination that this EQ does, even on the analog. It's not just the digital one. When you boost it and you cut it, it smooths out that lower end, and it also smooths out some of the rest of the actual signal. And then here, everything about 16 kilohertz, it's getting boosted ever so slightly and cut again. And if I turn this off, actually, you'll hear what it sounds like without it. Right, then I'll put it back on quick. It's very subtle, but when you have that going into a full mix, it sounds ever so slightly harsh without it. I'll leave this playing. You can hear it's actually smoothing out that whole signal. It's weird. It shouldn't work, but it's just sorcery. That's all it is. It's sorcery. And then after that, I've got a compressor, just a normal stock compressor from Ableton, set to quite a quick attack rate. Slow-ish release. And if you don't know what compression does, think of it as a volume fader. So what I use this for is, you're basically telling this bit of software, for every time it goes too loud, drop it down by, I'll show you while it's working here. Drop it down by this amount. So this is how many decibels it cuts every time it hits a certain threshold, which I've set here. So if it goes too loud, it starts cutting about 4 to 5 decibels. So it's basically like an automatic volume fader, because without that you would literally have to go in and program the volume to do it for every single note, and it would take forever to do a full song. And then I have another one of these, but I'm using it again like a volume fader, but how I'm using it here is, I'm telling it, for every one of these kick pedal hits, drop it down by 1 decibel. And kick pedals, the most amount of impact that a kick pedal is going to have is round about 50 hertz. And that's the lowest thing that you hear. A lot of people will tell you hear more than that. You can hear lower than that. We are capable of it, but you don't really hear it as such. You feel it more than anything. But 50 hertz, you hear that kick impact. So, but while everything's playing, that kick pedal, that kick hit gets buried. So using this, you're telling the guitars, and I also use this on the bass as well. You're telling the guitars and bass, for every time that kick pedal hits, drop the guitars and bass down 1 decibel, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it allows that kick pedal to just go bang, 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 and you can really hear it then, instead of it just getting lost and you're only hearing it in between chugs or whatever. And 1 decibel, it's not a lot, but it's just enough for you to be able to hear that kick pedal again. It's sorcery. And then I've got this. I probably had those compressors on the wrong screen. Damn it. Anyway, this looks like a lot. Trust me, I've seen people doing a hell of a lot more than this to a guitar EQ. I selected a preset, which, as you can see here, was lead vocals, because the part of a signal on a guitar that has the most amount of sound information that you need is in the same frequency range as a voice, the average human voice. Very, very similar frequency range. So for this, you can see on this one, I dropped everything from about 90 hertz to 100 hertz. It says 85, yeah, 85 hertz. And it doesn't allow anything less than that to come through. So you're cutting out a lot of the rumble on the guitar, so that's not going to interfere with the kick pedal impact or the bass's low end impact. You're only hearing that sort of vocal range frequency that the guitar has. Here, there's a lot of muddiness, usually on a normal tuned guitar down to about C. It'll be around about 300 to 500 hertz, and you would cut that by about no more than about 3.5 to 4 decibels. And the reason you do that is it's a really muddy frequency and really rumbly still. So by cutting that, you allow the other frequencies to shine through a bit better. Same with this one here. It's another muddy one. When I get to here, these frequencies start getting really scratchy. And your head tells you, well, why not just cut everything above there? You still need some of those frequencies. That's where the distortion sound lies. So you still need some of that hiss that gives the distortion the character. So you're only taking out the scratchiness sounds, and then you're taking everything out above, well, I'm taking out everything above 5,500. Again, this is because it's a really low tuned guitar. That would normally be set to about 6,000 to 7,000 hertz. But because it's more in line with a bass guitar, you kind of have to do these high and low cuts, similar to a bass guitar. But go back to this one, right? This EQ is just like a finesse EQ, polishing EQ. All it's doing is, again, a rumbly frequency here. I was just hearing it after all of this had been applied. There was still an ever so slight bit of rumble here that was interfering with the bass guitar. Wasn't allowing the bass guitar to come through enough. And the kick pedal. Same again with that frequency. Again, this is where most of the... I don't know if you've ever heard somebody talking about a bass guitar that has those piano lows or piano mids. That's where that really lovely clangy sound that you hear on a bass guitar, not the scratchy clangy distortion, just that punchy tone. If you're an Anthrax fan, Frank Bello boosts a lot of this frequency range, but it's where a lot of this lies. But you still will have to do a bit of a cut because there's some frequencies that are just, they interfere with anything in between these cuts. So it doesn't allow this bit, which is the information we do need, it doesn't allow that to come through. As soon as we cut these frequencies, this bit shines through more. And again, that's where all the really nice information, the tone information is coming from. Same with this again. And this, a lot of the nice tone comes from here. This is where you're starting to get into the distortion territory. If you have distortion on it, which I do. Same as with the guitars. These are the really scratchy nails on a chalkboard sound. And then very similar high cut, very similar to the low tune guitars, because it's more or less in the same tuning as the bass. As both of them are almost the same tunings, so pretty much the exact same high cut. The only difference with the bass guitars though is I record it I record one take, not one take, I'll record one channel of the bass. Then what I'll do is I'll copy that 2 more times into different tracks, separate tracks of their own. And then what I'll do is, you can't see it here because I've rendered these tracks, so when you render a track, you do it to save the computer memory, because if I didn't do this, it would start glitching and it wouldn't play properly, and because it's got that much software put into it. But basically all I do is this channel down here, it's the lower one visually. It's the lower end frequencies, so these are the bass frequencies. These are the lower mids up to the mids, the mid frequencies, and this is the high frequencies. So this one is clean. I do this for all my distorted bass tracks. I'll split it into 3 separate tracks. I'll have one that has completely clean low end. I'll have a low cut, high pass, if you like, that doesn't let anything less than, say, 65 to 75 hertz through. So everything below that threshold gets cut out. And again, you do this so that the low end on the bass doesn't get in the way of the low end frequencies of the kick pedal. And then when I get to here, I have a low cut again, but I'll bring that up further, sometimes till around 250 to 350 hertz. And then I'll have a high cut all the way down to maybe 1000 to 1500. So you're only getting that piano frequency that I mentioned earlier. It's only allowing those frequencies through. And then I put that through, see if I can see it here, Neural DSP. I put it through the Dark Glass Ultra, and I only apply a little bit of distortion to the mids. A little goes a long way sometimes when it comes to the bass and distortion. So I've got the Dark Glass Ultra. I think I used Parallax X as well. Parallax X is the one that most of your prog metal and gent metal bands, even some of the death and extreme death, will pretty much use Parallax X only for distorted bass. Dark Glass Ultra, you've got a bit more control of the frequencies, and it's got a different distortion character to Parallax X. And then when I get to here, that low cut high pass filter doesn't let anything below, I think it's 1500. No, actually, I think it might be less. Maybe about 600 actually to 750. Because you want some of each end between the low and the middle and the high. You want each of them to sort of meet each other and do that, because then they start working together rather than just going, cut them here and then you're missing some of the information. So you have a bit of a crossover. It's called a crossover. So the high end, I think I used Dark Glass Ultra again, but then I used, where is it? Aurora DSP Mammoth. And this thing it's the one that Christian Cola made. And he calls it the dangle frequency. It's the one that gives it that really punky, rattly sound. You know, when you really, it sounds like you're absolutely abusing the bass strings. You know, they're that clanky. But if you control it nice enough, it gives it a really lovely character. And then altogether, on its own, it sounds crap. But when you put it in a mix, it sounds lovely. But this is what it sounds like on its own, the bass guitar. Let's see, here's the low end. Middle. High end. You can hear that rattle. Then you put it all together. Hear that bing. Love that. Love that sound. But then, again, you put those two together though, the guitar and the bass, and I take out the bass though. Nope, not getting to vocals yet. Not getting to vocals. See what I mean? Guitar sounds powerful on its own. Bass sounds powerful enough, but put them together. So yeah, that's what it sounds like all together. Right, so that's the guitars, bass, drums. Not getting to vocals yet because we still have the chorus part, which is when that intro riff comes back in, but the guitar's more forward than the synth part this time. They sort of reverse roles by the time it gets to this point here. The guitar starts doing the more work, and the synth sort of backs off instead of where the intro was, which was synth does all the work and the guitar sort of sits at the back, just sort of enhancing the sound. And this is what it does here. Synth's still there, you see it here, but it's a lot lower volume now. So that guitar there, that you heard there, that's what I originally had as the intro before I done this part using the synth and my own voice sample. As far as processing goes for the guitars, there you go, a bit of chorus, but it's going in before the amp this time. Most people, even in a real life situation with a real amp and real pedal, they would have the chorus pedal after the amp. I put it before so that some of the distortion gets added to the original chorus signal as well. I think I'm using the exact same preset for the guitars. Oh no, I used a different one. Rhythm 2, still Joe Duplantier, Gojira X. But you can see here the gain is turned way back. There's hardly any distortion here. But when you hear it, still sounds really distorted. But that's because it's so low tuned. Not a lot of bass. I've took some of the bass out actually, because where you're playing on the fretboard for this part, there's no real bassy notes. In fact, there aren't any bassy notes in this section for that riff. So you can take out some of the bass, and when I come to the EQ section, you'll see that I drastically cut the low end frequencies out as well. I've boosted a bit more of the mids in this bit as well, because it's more of a lead sound. Treble, I didn't want a lot of it, because if you listen to the original of this song, this guitar is very subdued, but it's still distorted. It's still quite spooky and whatnot. Again, boosted the master, boosted the input here, output. Didn't touch the output here though, but boosted the master. A little bit more presence this time, less depth, because remember that depth is resonance, which is bass. It's the wood of the speaker cabinet. It's how it reacts to the low end frequencies, but there are none in this, so you don't need that depth there. So I'll show you the EQ. This is this is actually quite basic, this one. So I'm starting off with high pass, which is a low cut. It's not allowing anything below 280 odd hertz through. Anything below that, cut straight out. It's not needed because it's not even there. Those frequencies are not being played on the guitar. So all it's going to be playing there below this frequency is that rumble from the wood of the speaker cabinet, which does get artificially created in the software that I'm using. It's really clever. This, it's quite a it's not a boomy frequency, but it's quite a boxy frequency. Sometimes people say nasal, which I am. I have allergies, I'm sorry. Here, that's yeah, that should be a low shelf, to be honest, but whatever. It's taken out a boomy frequency, basically. Here, starting to get into those scratchy territories. So I've just taken a little bit of that out. And then exact same high cut or low pass filter. Exact same high cut as the main guitars and the bass guitar. And that'll mean that they'll all start. That'll mean that by using the same high frequency cut, it means that those guitars and bass guitar will all start sort of gelling together a bit more. And they'll never have, not one of them will ever be higher or harsher than the other. Let's see, what do I have after that? That was EQ. Again, another dynamic equalizer, just doing the exact same as what I had on the rhythm guitars. Even though I'm saying that there are no bassy frequencies, because of the resonance of the speaker cabinet in the software, some of it still actually gets through. Even though no bass frequencies are being played, it's just resonance from the wood. So it's doing the exact same as the rhythm guitars, taking a 1.5 decibels out as soon as it detects those jump frequencies. That's all that's doing. And then using the same trick as the rhythm guitars, just tweaking it ever so slightly for this sort of lead guitar sound, boosting it a little bit more and cutting it a little bit more here in the lower frequencies, and then in the mids to higher frequencies, still getting a bit of a boost, not as much as the rhythms though, and a bit less of a cut because it's not got a lot of those frequencies again. So that same trick, probably going to be the exact same, in fact it is the exact same compressor I used on the rhythm guitars. So that's the exact same process there. Exact same process for this. And this is where it tells this plugin, every time you hear the kick pedal, drop that volume down by a decibel, so that you can hear the kick pedal a bit more. It's doing the exact same thing. This, it's only for this guitar, these two guitars, because it's a lead and very ethereal, spooky sound. I wanted it to be a bit wider than the wall of sound that's already there. Because if I just had it in the same stereo field, I would have to boost it quite a bit in volume. And then it'll start sort of clashing a bit more. So this is a stereo widener, and it goes all the way up to 200%, so you can send that way out there to the left and way out there to the right, but I didn't want to do that because when you start doing that, you start losing the signal. So I'm just giving it a slight widening effect, and I'll turn it on and off so you can hear it on its own here. Right, so that's quite wide. Again, I can hear it, but you might not be able to hear it. But you might if you're on headphones. Turn it back on. Yeah, you can hear it. It's the same guitar processing as well. It's still got that shimmer reverb through Gojira X, and the delay, the exact same. That's what's giving it that sort of octavey sound. Sounds like almost like a mandolin being played above it. And then there's a bit of post EQ going on here. And there it is, the delay, exact same delay settings as the intro guitar, that main riff, and the exact same reverb. Okay, so onto the vocals, and I'm gonna fucking hate this part, because on its own, you're gonna hear just how shit a performance it actually was. And how much processing I had to do to get it to sound semi-decent. Are you ready for this shit? I know you're not. So let me just actually, I'm going to turn everything off. So you're going to hear it without any processing. You ready for this? Oh, there's EQ there. Hang on. What's that one? Sorry, reverb. There was reverb on. What's that set to? Right. Okay, drop that. Take that off. So you can see there, right? You can hear it now. It sounds, once it's in the mix and it's got all this processing on, it sounds like I'm letting rip, you know, but I'm not. Because I'm in a completely untreated house with no soundproofing, no sound dampening. The walls are kind of thick, but the windows let a lot of sound through them. So do the doors. And I've got quite a boomy voice, even talking in person. That is, but whether it comes through here, I don't know. But I've got quite a boomy voice, and when I'm doing harsh vocals in a studio, I've got a boomy voice. And I sing this a lot fucking better than I did here. As I said in Manuel's chat earlier on in the Discord, because I'm having to hold back, I'm restricting the airflow. I'm constricting it, which is not good for you. It's not good for you at all. So you're not allowing the vocal folds, the false vocal cords, which are above your normal voice box. Don't quote me on that, but as I was doing the, yeah, it is. It's above. False vocal cords are above than your normal voice box, which is down here. They're up here. As soon as you start restricting that airflow too much and you start restricting the volume, they don't vibrate the same. So you're really straining. But using the EQ and all the rest of it, you can trick it. You can trick the listener into thinking that I'm really fucking going for it here. You know, like Alex Terrible style. And then you put it all back on and you get... Oh, put the reverb back on, G. I'm doing that at like almost talking volume. I'm not roaring. Manuel does it as well. He's not roaring. He's doing it. He's got the same problem as me. He doesn't want to annoy his neighbours. So he's having to sort of restrict. He'll go full belt at a gig, but when he's at home recording vocals, he has to do this same thing. You know, where he has to restrict it and use processing to get that, to make the listener seem like they're going at full roar, but he's not. So anyway, put it back on. That's actually a bit too much reverb. Put too much on. A much too much. Okay, processing for the vocals. This is where everyone does this different, right? This is just what works for me. This is how I learned to do it, and this is what works for me. Some people will tell you compress the vocal first, and then EQ, and then maybe put another compressor on or another EQ. But I prefer to do a basic EQ first. A basic EQ is you take out all of the information, the bassy parts of the voice. You take all of that out. You take all the unnecessary hiss, the harsh, breathy sound out, and it just allows the rest of that voice to shine through more. So that's a very basic EQ move to start off with. And again, that's the nasal sort of frequency that I have. So I took a little bit of that out before I put a compressor on it. The reason I'm doing that though is because if I was to do a compressor first and then EQ, I've just compressed all that shit information that I didn't want in the signal, like all that bassiness, all that hissiness. By compressing it, I've just allowed that to get boosted. So you take it all out before you put the compressor on. When the compressor comes into this chain here, all that's going to be allowing the volume boosting here and there to do is only boost exactly what it needs. It's not boosting any of the shit frequencies or any of the shit high-end frequencies. What have I got here after this? It might be another EQ actually. Oh, yep. This is a dynamic EQ, which is similar to the guitar chug trick. Every time it hits a certain frequency, and here you hear when I'm talking, I've got quite a whistly, scratchy S sound, and that comes through in my vocals really, really badly. So what I'm doing here is when that gets switched on at this frequency here, 4280 hertz, that's where that scratchy S sound comes from. So I'm telling this piece of software, every time you hear that, drop it by 3.5 decibels, which sounds like a lot, but as I said, I have a lot of that frequency in my S's. And it's a de-essing trick. I still use a de-esser later on. De-essing is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking the S's out of the signal. The sibilance, it's taking that out. But I've done that beforehand because I don't want that frequency to get into the compressor and be boosted. You know, it's counterproductive then. What's this? This is just an equalizer, another equalizer, and this is just boosting in the frequencies that I like the sound of, that work with the guitars and the bass better, taking out a bit more of the low end again here, starting to get into the scratchy territory, the harsh S's, the sibilant frequencies, maybe boosting a couple of bits here, so that, because a little bit of the breathy frequencies is nice, even in harsh vocals. So sometimes you'll maybe want to boost them. Other frequencies, you want to cut them out altogether. So that's just another EQ. And after that, rather than just making drastic cuts with one equalizer, I'll do cuts with one equalizer and boosts with one. If it still doesn't sound right, rather than going back into that last one and messing up the work that I've just done to try and polish it up, I'll open another one, find the frequencies that are still annoying me after that first polishing EQ, not the basic EQ, the polishing EQ. After I've done that, if I still don't like it, I'm boosting or cutting the frequencies that I still don't like after it, and then I go onto the compressor because by that point, I've none of the frequencies that are really horrible, that I don't like. They've all been taken away. All the good stuff's been boosted slightly, not a lot, because that's what the compressor's going to do. So here, you'll see how much compression's been put in to allow the higher, the lower volume notes to get more in line with the louder parts of the lines. That's basically what it's doing. Instead of having it going where it sounds like that, and then at times it just goes like that, it's basically going, it's just doing that while these parts are still doing that, and it sounds at the same volume then. That's all the compressor does. It's an automatic volume fader. So without that though, without these compressors and all this after it, it'll still sound really bad. Again, this looks like a lot, but I've seen people using a lot more for vocals. So without the compressors, because that's almost a whisper, because I'm basically going, that's pretty much the volume I'm doing that at. You add the compressor in, brought that lower volume section of that up, and the higher volume part of that section, it's lowered slightly. Still wasn't enough, but rather than getting one compressor to do too much of the work, and then it starts sounding really, it'll sound like it's getting pumped, like, you know, like the volume's just getting really quickly boosted and quickly dropped, and it just sounds horrible. So I'll use 2 compressors and get it to do a little bit at a time between the 2. So that first compressor is doing about between 6 to 10 decibels of gain reduction. So for all those louder sections, it's dropping the volume down by about 6 to 10 decibels, just so that that lower section shines through more. It still wasn't enough, so you apply another one. Pretty much, in fact, it's the exact same settings as the first. And it's going to do the same work as the first one, but you put the 2 together and they do a bigger job. So it sounds like this. It's subtle, but trust me, it makes a big difference. That higher part doesn't sound as loud when I put the second one on. That lower one, slightly less volume. Put this one on, and everything just sounds a bit more even. After that, what do we have here? Yeah. So I was talking to Mike Shreds. Go follow Mike Shreds, because he was going to do the vocals for this, but he's working on another project for someone just now, and it's an album. So Mike puts that much effort into what he does for not just his own stuff, but even for other people. He puts the same amount of effort into it, and the amount of work. It could take him months to finish this album. So I just thought, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. But I was talking to him about how to process the vocal track that I had here, and I was telling him, not happy with it. There's bits I like, there's bits I really hate, and he was telling me different techniques to try and bring parts down, bits up. I ended up re-recording some of the parts though, but he was talking about this compressor here that I used to use a lot actually. I used to use this a lot on bass guitar. It works really nice on bass actually. And it's doing a very similar, if not exact same job as these two, which come with this whole piece of recording software, Ableton. This is a third-party one though that I bought myself, and it's a tube compressor, so you're going to get a bit more of that classical white noise-ish compression sound, but it's got a bit of an ever so slight bit of static sound to it, and you might think, well, isn't that what you were trying to take out in all the other tracks is hissiness? Isn't that what static is? Yes and no. You see, I was talking to Doomsack here actually. I was talking about the mixing, and the human ear, the human brain is designed to recognize patterns, even if it's perceiving something that has no pattern. It tries to make sense of that thing that at a first glance doesn't make sense to the brain, but it's programmed to basically recognize harmony, shape, and to make for the brain to have an idea what it's looking or listening to. That's what you do with the tube compressor and even distortion. It creates a little bit of dissonance, which is unpleasant on its own. A little bit of dissonance is actually pleasant. On its own, dissonance is horrible, but you add it to another frequency and it might actually enhance that frequency because it's got something to rub off of and bounce off of. So it's kind of like salt. When you put salt on a meal, the meal might taste a bit bland. What do we use salt for? Because on that first bite, our tongues, our taste buds detect the salt and go, oh, and get excited. And it's like, oh, on its own, that's kind of not pleasant. But just for a split second, there's a little bit of dissonance here. Cognitive dissonance, perceived dissonance. There's a little bit of perceived dissonance there. And then the brain goes, but taste that. That is awesome compared to that salt. This is exactly what dissonance does with music patterns. It does the same thing as salt. It just, on its own, it's too much of a shock to the system. Pair it up with something that's nice, but could be a lot nicer, and the two just do that and create something amazing and beautiful. That's all this thing's doing here. Just introducing a bit of harmonic dissonance to let the other harmonics shine through. This thing here, it's got a lot of presets for vocals, right? It's a lot of presets for vocals. I had one of them on before. I think it was the Presence Boost. And it was okay, you know, but I ended up taking it off again and just used it as a de-esser. And here, this is another de-esser. And I've done a bit of de-essing already. With this one here, again, you get each of these things to do a little bit of the work at the same time to the same signal, and together they do a massive job rather than having one thing doing a lot, sometimes too much, and it starts introducing a lot of problems. Then that's all this thing's doing. It's another de-esser. Lisp speaks for itself, takes out some of the S's and makes it sound a bit less harsh, and it's not exciting to look at. It just does exactly what it sounds like. It turns a s into a. This one here, Little Radiator. It's a distortion, but this distortion can be very abrasive or it can be very subtle, and I'm using it extremely subtly here. Above here, it starts getting quite harsh. Here, it's, you know, the less you go, the less perceptible the distortion is. It'll still be there, but the less perceptible it is. So I'm just putting a little bit on, and again, I'm only applying a little bit of it to the signal. Without it, the vocal sounds like this. And because of the vocal compression, it introduces a bit of natural distortion anyway. So all I'm using this for is to boost and enhance that natural distortion at times. I don't want it to do it too much though. I want it to just put a little bit of salt on it, you know. Again, I can hear it, but not a lot. If I had headphones on, probably is a bit more clearer. You'll be able to hear the difference a bit more. This is a limiter. It's a brick wall limiter. A brick wall limiter is exactly the same as a compressor. It'll push really loud signals. It'll push them down. But rather than doing it by doing this to the signal, you know, the low parts come up slightly as the higher volumes come down. Brick wall limiter will take the whole signal and just do that. And just only push down and not allow anything above a certain volume to get through. If you put too much of this on, it'll start becoming really, really distorted. And I mean really distorted. It's got this thing in it. I've got it set to aggressive because even after all this, some of the volume jumps were still very apparent. So set it to aggressive, and it's got this thing. I'm not going to click it here, but if you play the signal back and you click this learn, it'll listen to about 2 or 3 seconds worth, and it'll go. And you always, if you're using this, always listen to the loudest part of the song's signal. Always listen to the loudest part, because then what it's going to do is it's going to listen to that part of the whole signal, and it's going to go, okay, yeah, it's really loud there. It could do with coming down by that much, and it does it automatically. That's it. I don't have to sit and listen to it and go, sounds like it could come down again. So long as I find the loudest part in the vocal track of the whole song, loop it so that it's just playing that part of the track over and over and over, so that this software hears that part of the signal constantly getting way too loud. It'll go, well, yeah, that's way too fucking loud. Bring it down X amount, and then it'll apply that to the whole track then, the whole vocal track. It won't allow anything above that range to get through. So you're basically smooshing that whole track down. That's all it's doing. After that, there were still a couple of little, it literally is little things here. I felt like there was still a little bit of a low end, just an ever so slight low end rumble coming through. You hear it? Just very subtle, but it was there. But when you hear, doesn't sound like a lot on its own, but when you have that going along with the bass, the kick pedal, and any of the lower end of the frequencies of the rhythm guitar, they start clashing really badly, and that lower frequency on the vocal starts booming. Even though when you heard the difference there, when the vocal track's on its own, it's not actually taking out a hell of a lot. Hence why sometimes a little goes a long way. It goes as far as cuts go as well. What else have I got here? That's not actually doing anything, so I can delete that. Is this one doing anything? That one's doing absolutely nothing again. So I've literally just got two parts. I have a high pass filter, which is a low cut, dropping everything below 268 Hertz. It's not allowing anything else through below that. It's just taking out all the low end information, all the rumble out completely. It's garbage, don't need it. Here, in the high end, above, even though, where was it? I think back here. Yep, even though back here, I have a high cut at 4,300 Hertz. You would think, well, there's nothing else above there anyway. it's still there. It's still technically there. So, but with that basic EQ, I took out some of the breathiness so that the compressor didn't go, oh, I need to boost that now. And then it just goes, you know. So you just wait until you've done all of that first, and then you put it in a little bit at a time until you find where it's nice. So if I was to do this, it's not doing anything because that's not playing. It's sounding like that, and it's sounding like this, and then all that number 2 is doing, it's doing this. It's just opening it up a little bit more, just to make it sound a bit more airy, a bit breathier, because I had to take a lot of that information out so that I could boost the stuff that I did like. I can put that back in, a little bit back in later on. And that's the vocals. That's everything. Oh, there is a little bit of EQ on the drums though. I think I had a little bit of EQ. Yeah, I did. Yeah, on the kick pedal. Just show you what I've done here. I'll play it without it first. So you can hear there, it sounds like sounds like a wet kipper is hitting that kick pedal. And it does, believe me, that kick pedal sound does sound nice on some genres, certain guitar tones, but on this, it was horrible. It was just too clicky. So what I done was I applied this. That's doing nothing, so I can take that out. That one's doing nothing, take that out. That one's doing nothing, take that out, because it's only this that I'm doing. High cut or low pass. And it's taking all of that clickiness, that wet sound, wet kipper sound was above 7 kilohertz, 7,200. So if I play this without, first, wet. And not the good kind of wet. Put it back on. More. And then I'll take it off. I'll take that off with the mix, with everything in. Can't really hear the kick pedal because it's only detecting the clickiness there once everything else has been played along with it. Put the EQ on with that high cut. Just sounds more defined now. I think EQ I had for, yeah, I've got EQ for snare and cymbals. We'll do snare first. Let me see, put this just here so that I can just, oh, you can't. Okay. So without any of that on, it sounds like this. Along with the mix. It sounds good. It's not bad. But you put the EQ and the effect that I have here on, and it sounds like, on its own it sounds like shit. So it's just getting more of that impact sound. Still got a bit of the rattle from the underside of the snare. Still a little bit of the high end, but it's more of the lower end that it's hearing now after all this has been put on. And this is how I've done it. The main part of the frequency on the snare, on this snare, and I did do what Manuel said the other day. He was saying the only difference with the drums that I'd done and Thomas Hacker's sound was the snare. He detunes his snare. I actually went back and done that. I detuned my snare. So all this EQ is doing is it's not really doing a lot. It's doing a low cut, high pass. So it's not allowing anything lower than 146 hertz through, because that's just rumbly garbage that we don't need and is going to clash with kick pedal, the bass, guitar, some of the guitar frequencies. The main meat and potatoes of the snare sound is around about here, 200 of this particular snare sound. That'll change if you tune that snare back to where it should have been. This frequency changes, because you never think of a snare as being a particular key, but it is always in a particular key. Key is just as part of the frequency, the hertz range. So this is where the meat and potatoes, and you'll see it here where that snare hits. See it there? That's where most of the impact is, so I'm just boosting that slightly. Some might say that that's actually quite drastic, but I like a lot of impact on the snare. It's really punchy. This is pretty much it's almost an octave up from this initial one. Just boosting this one ever so slightly, because it's also got a little bit of the impact sound. If I turn this, what is it, 6? If I turn that off, back on. Yeah, hardly notice it, but it's doing something when you hear it all in the mix though. Let me see this one. Just taking a little bit of boxiness, a little bit of the cardboard sound away. And again, 1.5 decibels is not a lot, but when you have it in a full mix, 1.5 decibels has a lot of information within it. Let's see, and I'll explain myself after I've showed you the drums here. What I mean by 1.5 decibels, a lot goes on in 1.5 decibels. So this, again, you saw this earlier, the little radiator. Use this on my voice. This time I'm using it on the snare. I want a little bit of that impact and some of that, the wires underneath the snare, but the snare gate. I want it to slightly distort that rattle and a bit of the impact, and it just gives it more of a cannonball sound. And then have a bit of a reverb on it, just to give it a bit more boom, boom. Makes the note last longer, so it's not just but. It just goes ba 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 and just rings out a little bit. So without it, it sounds like. That's, and I mean, it looks like a lot here, but when you have this mix amount down here, that's like only about 30% of this that I'm putting into that signal, and look at the difference it's making. And then after that, you heard it there. Well, you might not realise it, but it was a little bit harsh sounding. Take that one off there. Other one. There we go. So that, doing nothing. Delete you. What are you doing? Number 2, doing nothing. Take you out. So here, this is where it's getting into that a little bit of the nicer part of the scratchy, hissy noise. It's, remember what I said about a little bit of dissonance can sometimes make other frequencies sound nicer? That's basically all this is doing. I'm just putting a little bit of this frequency in just to make it sound a little bit nicer. And then I'm taking off a lot of the really harsh, hissy information out of it again completely. So if I don't have it on, On its own, it sounds kind of muddy, sounds a bit muffled. Put it in a mix though, play it without. Again. So it's by taking that higher part out, the higher scratchy frequency and airy frequencies, allowed that impact part, the more impactful parts, to come through a bit more. So that's the snare. Toms didn't do anything except I put a little bit of reverb on them as well. So there's my reverb, and I'm using this. Where is it? That's the snare reverb, which is a different bit of software. It's Magic 7. Really nice bit of kit. You can have this so that it's not detecting the initial impact. That's what the pre-delay will do. It'll say, when do you want me to switch on? You want me to switch on like right away? As soon as it detects something, it's just going to let all of that ring? Or do you want the initial bang to come in first and then only have that after it to resonate? So that's all that's doing. I'm telling it, I don't want the initial bang to go bang, 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 bang. You know, I just want bang. You know, that's all it's doing. Taking out a little bit of the low frequency so that it's not too much of the bassy end of the snare getting reverb to it. Allowing a little bit more of the airy frequencies to have that reverb on. And then I'm just, because this is a return signal, so that I've applied this reverb to, and then I can control it here. That's this thing here. So with this, I can dial the amount of that I'm putting into the snare. So I just turn that all the way up. That's it. Balls to the wall reverb. And then you can just apply a little bit of it here. You can see there, I'm using just a smidge on the kick, because the kick was just a bit too, it was too quick. It was just but. So I wanted it to go ba. So I'm using this reverb as well to do that. I think I'm doing something similar with the toms as well. Yeah, it's using the same one. Just doing the exact same thing, letting some of the tom hits ring through. Let me see, there's a busy part with the toms. There we go. I'll just loop that part here, solo it up. You'll hear it. So let me just bring that, turn that off. Sounds nice on its own. It sounds like it is ringing on, and it's resonating a little bit on its own, because the drum software has its own reverb built in, but it just wasn't enough, because this track, it has that kind of lead guitar with quite it has a lot of reverb on it. Then you've got the synth part, which is a lot of reverb. It's basically swirling round. So when you've got the really dry drum sound, it just sounds like but. So you want it to just rumble a little bit more. So I think it was about there. So you put that on. Here it is in the mix. I'm going to have to turn those vocals down, actually. That's very fucking loud. I don't know why it's that loud. Didn't sound like that earlier. Let's see. So, this is actually a good thing, because normally when you're, like you see with this sample here and these guitars, let me see, volume mixer. Let me find just the rhythm, actually. The volume. Yeah, so most of the guitar signal, the rhythm guitar signal, it's all the exact same volume all the way through. It's only just certain parts I'm dropping it down, but not a hell of a lot. Right, so you'll hear it here. You probably can't even hear that it's dropped. But if I didn't do that one almost 2 decibel drop in volume, this part here, that spooky guitar part, would get hidden, and I would have to boost this even more, and then it just clashes. So you just drop, I just drop the bass by a little. Can't see it there. Let me put that back here. Yeah, so you can see here I'm dropping the bass in the same spot. It's getting dropped a little bit there on the main one. I think that's because the vocals come in there, so it's kind of clashing with the vocals, the bass guitar, a little bit at this section. So I just dropped it ever so slightly. But you can see what I mean. This is what I was saying earlier on. Like, that's only 1.5 to 2 decibels of a drop in volume, and you hardly heard it, you hardly noticed it. But if I didn't do that, those sections would sound way too loud and harsh, and it would mean that when this guitar comes back in on its own, with none of the spooky lead on it or vocals, it gives it more of an impact when that comes back in, because your ears didn't notice that it had even turned down. So when that goes back up to where it was before there, you're going to perceive that as, Jesus, it's went way louder in a good way. But it hasn't, it's just went back to where it was. So that's basically all that's doing. So this is what's called automation, right? If you've never done it before, this is automation. It looks complex, and a lot of people hate having to do it. This is my favourite part. I love doing all the rest of it, don't get me wrong. I love hearing this process coming along, hearing everything start to gel really well, some of the bits that I want to shine more really coming alive. But the nearest I can describe to what this does is, it's like you have a sketch that looks nice, or you can have a still life drawn. That's kind of what this does. It's the difference between putting in more detail to allow other parts to work better and have more impact. And again, it's also like sculpting away some of the crap that you don't need, or that's maybe a bit too loud. So you'll see here there's some drops, and it's maybe only like certain syllables. You know, so if I'm talking like this way, I don't need to do anything. But if I was to talk like that, I would have to automate that signal so that that part was dropped down. That's all this is doing. That's automation. And that's my favourite bit, because I'll listen back to those vocals before I'd done this, and I know I did because I just done it today. I was listening back to it before I'd done any of this, and I was like, whoa, it just got loud there really quickly, and then back to normal. That's horrible. And then you just do these little things, and yeah, just sounds a whole lot better. Yeah, I'm going to have to turn the overall thing down a little bit, because that was quite freaking loud. 7 point. I'm only going to drop it by about 0.3 of a decibel. Again, a little can go a long way. You hear that? Did you hear the stuttering, that's my CPU, because I've got all these effects switched on. Because now that I'm happy with the mix, I can then just render each of these, and it'll bake all these effects into that signal, and then I can never mess with them again. You've basically said, I'm happy, leave it at that, just put all those effects in, and it's almost like it's recording that into another track. It's not, it's just doing it all on the one track, but it's baking all of these processes and plugins into the signal, and then they don't have to be switched on, and they're no longer taking up memory or RAM. That's that. So yeah, that's how I mix. So I'll show you the fade out. Actually, I'll show you the fade out, because fade out is actually quite nice as well. It was weird because when I was listening to the original, I'd done the fade out without, obviously I listened, I refer back and forward between my own cover and the original of this track. But when it came to doing this fade out, it looks weird. Most fade outs will either have a slightly scooped thing where it starts drastic, starts lessening the slope, gets flatter until it gets to where it needs to be at 0 point. I'd done mines without even listening to the reference, the original, and it sounded too quick. It was too quick of a fade out, and I could not figure out, because like between here and here, where I have the loudest part, the main part of the signal, and the 0 of the whole signal, that was the exact same length of time between my fade out and theirs, and yet mine sounded quicker, and it was just because of this. By the time their fade out got to this point, it had lessened the slope and actually made it curve that way. It's weird. It's a weird fade out, but it works. So this is what it sounds like now. Lessening out the slope. Bang. That's that. So I'm not going to do with what most people. I'm not going to do what most people do at this point now, by playing the full track, because if anybody is watching the playback, you're going to have to go and watch the YouTube video now if you want to hear the finished product. And it's not me being a prick, it's just that's where I put all my finished content. I have a portfolio over there, and every time I do one of these, whether it's a cover or something original, which is coming soon, it's going to be added into the portfolio, and it just helps build that so that people will hear, because I don't always do. Metal has subgenres, right? We all know that, right? I don't do the same subgenre. I do a broad spectrum. Like, I can do classic metal. I hate that fucking term, because classic metal to me was just fucking metal. Like, you're talking Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Testament, Anthrax. It was just metal. You didn't have all the fucking splitting of the subgenres. But I can see why it did have to start doing it, because you started getting death metal. Death! I'll have to go and tell the manager. Voice needs to recover quick here, but anyway. Yeah, but you would have what used to just be normal death metal to me. And then you started getting, but now there's extreme death, now there's power death, now there's groove death, now there's fucking... I understand, but it's a pain in the ass. But I do a mix of all the subgenres. So it means that when people go to my YouTube channel and eventually my website, they'll be able to see the portfolio, they'll hear all the different genres, and it's not all going to be metal, because I have punk tracks in there. I'm going to be doing a bit of blues eventually soon, with a bit of slide guitar. And normal, proper singing that I used to do. Yeah, so there's going to be a mix of genres that people will be able to play back and go, oh, it's not just metal then. You can do that, you can do that, you can do that. And it's not just this particular genre of metal, it's you can do this, you can do that. So that's why I'm saying I'm not going to play the track here on this playback, even the VOD on Twitch. If you want to hear the full version, you're going to have to go to the video when it gets uploaded, which is just the cover. It's on its own. You can go there once it gets uploaded. If you're not subscribed, you're going to have to subscribe. And if you're listening to the portfolio and you like the sound of some of it and you are interested, there's a video there in the portfolio where I explain if you have your own recordings and you're just not happy with the mix itself, or you don't know how to do it, send it to me. Watch the video that's in the playlist on YouTube. I explain everything there. How to contact me. Contact email is in the link in the description here on YouTube. You can find me there. Contact me at the email. But I hope that was informative. Thank you so much for sticking around. And I hope I didn't waffle on too much and it actually made some sense. Because this is what I also want to do in the YouTube channel, is I want to do, whenever I do a mix, I want to do this breakdown. Because let's see the likes of that intro sequence. There's some people that might go, I thought that was the guitar. I thought that was just a load of effects slapped on it. But then, obviously, Manuel, Zeal and Ardor, go and follow him on Twitch if you're watching here on YouTube. When he said to us the other day, oh no, that's a sample. That's a vocal sample, I'm pretty sure, with a load of effects on it, and then it's just got the guitar subtly in there in the background at the intro, and I didn't know that. And most people won't even know that that's listening to it. Because believe me, I searched all of YouTube and online. How did they do that intro? Doesn't tell you anywhere. That's why doing these breakdowns is going to be handy. And it also lets people shows people that I'm not just doing what I know Manuel was joking, and I know he was joking because he did say, no, yours, he says it's a 1-to-1, and one of my mates actually said, you've just sent me the original without the vocals. And I was like, I really haven't, but he was joking. But I know there's some people, whenever I do one of these, that are probably thinking, there's no way he's playing that shit or mixing it. There's no way. Because I've only been doing it for 6 or 7 years. Properly, I've only been doing it for about 4 years. Properly. Before stuff started clicking in my head and it started making sense. And my mixes started taking a real big change just in this past year and a half. So this is a good way of showing people you don't need all the expensive software. I mean, most of the stuff that you saw me using was stock or free software. It's not professional perpetual licenses that cost like 150 to like $1,000 per plugin. Do you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, I do have some of those. I do have a lot of software that I've gathered over the years, but you don't need it. It has its uses at certain times, but if you just want to do a basic metal mix, you don't need to do it. And okay, this wasn't basic, but still a good example. So this is why I want to do these as well, is for other people to learn along. So thanks again, guys. Thanks very much for sticking around and listening to me. And like I said, I hope it did make sense. I will hopefully see you again very soon, as soon as I start getting some more stuff together. So I will just say thank you very much. See you in the next one. Cheers, folks. Bye.